Qatar has been inhabited for over 50,000 years, although its emergence as a distinct nation is a fairly recent development. It was a peripheral part of several empires, including the Seleucids, Parthians, and Sasanians, before being introduced to Islam in the 7th century CE. Under the Abbasid caliphate, which peaked in the 13th century, Qatar became a prominent pearling center and saw the establishment of several new settlements. In the coming centuries, Qatar would change hands several times, falling under brief Portuguese dominion in the 16th century before submitting to the rising Ottoman Empire in 1521. The Ottomans eventually lost interest in the area and the subsequent lack of military presence led to their expulsion by the Bani Khalid, an Arab tribal confederation that ruled much of the Persian Gulf. Centered in what is today eastern Saudi Arabia, the Bani Khalid held sway over Qatar throughout most of the 17th and 18th centuries. As the hold began to weaken in the 1760s, rival factions like the Al-Khalifa family arrived from neighboring regions. After establishing the prosperous trading center of Zubarah, near the northern tip of the peninsula, the Al-Khalifa expanded outward and gained control of the nearby island of Bahrain in the 1790s, which they continue to rule today. As the Al-Khalifa began shifting the focus to Bahrain, the rival Al Thani, who remain Qatar's ruling family today, consolidated the control of the Qatar Peninsula throughout the 19th century. The Al-Khalifa continued to claim the area, and the two factions fought a war that culminated in an 1867 truce mediated by the British. The agreement recognized Mohammed bin Thani as the rightful representative of the Qatari people. Some years later, Muhammad's son, Qasim al-Thani, accepted the title of governor from the Ottomans, who were trying to re-establish authority in the region after centuries of neglect. Following a political dispute with his ostensible overlords, Qasim al-Thani led a revolt in 1893, gaining Qatar further autonomy within the Ottoman Empire and paving the way for the development of a sovereign nation. During the First World War, Qatar took part in the Arab revolt against Ottoman rule, securing its independence. In 1916, Abdullah bin Qasim al-Thani, Qasim's son and successor, entered an agreement with the UK that effectively established the al-Thani as the ruling family of Qatar. The British would protect the nation from both internal and external threats, allow for special rights for British subjects operating in the territory, and ensured that the UK would have a say in Qatar's foreign relations. While this arrangement meant that the British exercised de facto power over the country, it also signified yet another big step towards complete sovereignty. Al-Thani's position was further strengthened by the discovery of oil reserves in 1939. Following the end of the Second World War, British power in the region began to wane, while increased oil revenue allowed Qatar to expand and modernize its economy. By the 1950s, this newfound wealth, combined with ever-diminishing British influence, allowed Qatar and its neighbors to pressure the UK to withdraw from the region. In 1968, the British officially announced that they would fully depart from the Persian Gulf in 3 years, leaving it up to the inhabitants to determine the post-independent future. Upon this declaration, Qatar considered joining a federation with Bahrain and the 7 trucial states which make up present-day United Arab Emirates. Unable to agree on the terms of the federation, Qatar opted to go its own way and adopt a constitution declaring its independence in 1971, which the UK recognized. After nearly 200 years of gradually gaining autonomy, Qatar was now a fully sovereign, self-governed state. forming the basis of Qatari nationhood and civic identity. The Constitution of Qatar states that the ruler will always be chosen from the Al Thani family with assistance by a council of ministers and a consultative council. The Consultative Council was never elected. Instead, there is an advisory council appointed by the ruler. Amid occasional protests and even sporadic infighting within the ruling family, the Al Thani have retained solid control of the country, amassing considerable wealth and influence both domestically and internationally. Qatar's demographics are a reflection of this turbulent history, which has entailed centuries of migration, foreign rule, and international commerce. The native people of Qatar roughly span three distinctive ethnic and cultural groups. First are the Bedouin, desert nomads and traders who number around 37,000. Many continue the traditional way of life. Then there are Haidar, who trace their ancestry to Iran, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. They are the legacy of centuries of Persian rule, migration, and trade in Qatar. Finally, there are the Abd, whose name roughly translates to slave in English. They trace their ancestry to the African slaves who were brought to the country over the last several centuries. Despite these differences, Qataris form a cohesive nationality with little instability or infighting. Today all three groups are recognized as equal citizens who form one nation.